Swords that glistened with toxic rainbows and could cleave a ghoul that easily definitely counted as magical. Gissa scowled, whistling a long, low note. All around her, the dead she had risen for her own amusement turned towards the cluster on the shore. She whistled again, and they began their advance. The metallic people, who weren't scabs after all, judging by the way they bled black oil, not viscous goo, when her obedient creations ripped them limb from limb. They fought brilliantly and hard, but in the end, they were outnumbered by a factor of dozens. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Ether Hub. I'm Simon, bringing you more Magic the Gathering lore. Today we continue the story of March of the Machine, MTG's latest set that sees the whole of the multiverse coming undone. Previously in the story, which you can find linked on your screen now or in the description below, we traveled to the plane of Ixalan and witnessed how the planeswalker Huatli defended her world. Though one of the plane's dinosaur elders was corrupted, she managed to rouse the other dino lords to fend off Phyrexia, at least for the moment. Before we begin, if you're enjoying the content, consider showing your support by leaving a like, becoming a subscriber or member of the channel, leaving a super thanks, and of course, sharing it with your friends. Now we continue with our story in Chapter 9 of March of the Machine, Innistrad, Family Game Night, written by Sean and McGuire. The dark world of Innistrad has survived all sorts of horrors in its history, a plague of undeath and creatures of the night emboldened by the disappearance of the plane's guardian angel Avacyn. That same angel being twisted by the whispers of the Eldrazi titans as Emrakul descended to feed upon the populace. Even the werewolves and vampires of Innistrad had had their nightmarish issues that caused the world to suffer. And once again, as it always does, darkness falls. The siblings of Death and Rebirth, Gissa and Giraffe, are trading letters of general insult to one another. Nothing new for their strange relationship. A rivalry birthed in their respective disciplines. Both deal in raising the dead, only the methods differ. Gissa using mana in traditional resurrection magic, and Giraffe being a stitcher, using science to craft handmade zombified scabs. Each, of course, had their merits, but it was a point of contention between the two regarding who truly produced the better zombies. Lately, Gissa and Giraffe had noticed a white lattice combing through the skies of Innistrad, each placing the blame of the phenomenon on the other's feet. Gissa was bored, as she often got when there wasn't enough entertaining humans to resurrect. It was time for a little game. The siblings would regularly engage in Necrowarfare, mock demonstrations of course, bouts to see who could make a sturdier cadaver. Gissa suggests another round. Giraffe agreed, with some rules of course, her boredom driving her to accept the challenge regardless. As Gissa enjoys her territory, walking through the fetid marshes of the Angleterm, she spots figures walking gracefully from the river, their white exteriors gleaming in the moonlight. Surely these were new constructs clad in metal armor. Still, they didn't shamble. They were certainly a step up from his usual minions. She watched as one drew a sword, dripping in a black oil, its slash causing a rainbow of light to dance as it cut clean through one of her perfectly innocent ghouls. Giraffe had broken at least 3 of his own rules in a single attack. She summoned up several others to take its place, descending on the metal-clad monsters, which she had easily outnumbered. After the things were dismantled, Gissa investigated. They were clearly not zombies, at least nothing of her brother's doing. She tried to call life back into the metal and oil-ridden bodies, but nothing. These were nothing more than bags of meat and metal, never truly alive. It was time to bring this up to her brother. While Gissa tried to blame Giraffe for these things, her brother was quick to tell her everything that had happened. A man with white hair and a cold demeanor had come to tell his mentor, Ludwig, about these monsters. Phyrexians, he called them. This was Soren, spreading the word of their invasion of Innistrad. Luckily, his research shed some light on this enemy, their oil-tainted living minds, not the undead, meaning they were uniquely equipped to meet this threat. Together, they issued a ceasefire, deciding to wage a necro war against these Phyrexians, with whomever tallying the most kills being declared the winner. The war for Innistrad was on. As expected, the Phyrexians focused their attacks on the larger cities, one of which being where Giraffe set up his laboratory. Gissa watched as her brother's creations defended the city's walls. She had to admit, he was rather creative in designing his amalgamations. Giant scabs hurled broken trees, shattering the Phyrexian ranks. Winged undead turtles dropped bombs that shredded through their metal bodies with shrapnel. But still, his scabs had their limits. Namely, they had to be made, not just commanded. Gissa breathed in the latent death magic that permeated the swamp. She pulled on the bones of the mire, summoning up an undead moondrake that took flight, leading countless other ghouls and shamblers towards the front lines. The Phyrexians were creative as well. Their ranks were made up of converted humans, werewolves still shapeshifted, vampires, and any other number of unholy abominations. From their center of mass, wings flapped and took flight. They had a moondrake of their own. Rather than rotting flesh, it was strung together with wires and tubing, more mechanical than alive or undead. The two drakes clashed midair, biting and ripping and lashing and flailing. Gissa saw it as a decisive dance, a true test of zombies against Phyrexia. The two non-living masses fell from the sky, their wings collectively useless now. In a fell strike, her risen drake removed the head of the Phyrexian convert. It continued on, walking atop its fallen enemy, whipping its rotten tail and arms through the Phyrexian ranks. Gissa was pleased. She was much less pleased to see the new Phyrexian army marching overland, directly towards her covert position. She wouldn't be able to command unseen for much longer. Meanwhile, Giraffe's hands were working overtime. He had to admit, in some aspects, his sister's art was better. It was more efficient than his own, plus, she didn't have to come close to any Phyrexian oil. He put himself in danger with every limb and torso he stitched together. The city around him was growing quiet. He knew the Phyrexians were decimating the populace because of all the excess material his scabs were bringing to him. So long as he stood, he would continue his work, until his undead servant brought him the body of something big. Gissa watched on with amusement as Giraffe's newest and biggest creation hawked over the city's defenses. It's a massive forest creature, or at least it was. A mix between a bear, the antlers of a deer, hardened leather appendages. It easily took out several Phyrexians with each swing, clearing the walls and drawing attention away from Gissa's ghouls. She saw this as a challenge. She wouldn't let her brother best her in size. She reached for a prize. Deep in the soft dirt, the cold, lifeless waters, the space between graves. She felt it, and poured all of her magic into it, exhausting her. What answered her call was nothing she had ever seen before. It had the legs of a crab, the armored body of a lobster, and the long whip-like tentacles of a kraken. It slowly lumbered its way out of the water, crushing Phyrexians as it strolled, Gissa laughing in amusement. No matter the size or their numbers, the Phyrexians were endless, tireless. Only they could reuse their dead, which meant eventually Gissa and Giraffe would be out of materials. They couldn't recycle bodies forever, even bodies as big as these. First, it was Giraffe's abomination to fall. Then, the thin legs, not suited for land travel, of her own monster were cut clean, rendering her monster worthless as well. Gissa stopped laughing. The Phyrexians were coming for her now, and no amount of ghouls was going to stop them. Gissa receives another frantic note from her brother, brought to her by some cobbled together bat. He had a plan. He would need the bodies of both his and her fallen creatures. The problem was, once Gissa's magic took hold of a corpse, Giraffe's science would be unable to will it back. She must pull her magic from her newest toy, and then leave it in Giraffe's hands. With Phyrexians climbing her walls now, as much as she despised the thought, she relinquished her great lobster prize to Giraffe. With the ingredients ready, Giraffe set himself to work. They couldn't fit these bodies in his laboratory, it was just far too small, which meant he had to work out in the open, exposing himself to the Phyrexians. It didn't matter. After this, his greatest creation, all of Innistrad would know his name. He would become the greatest stitcher the plane had ever seen. Over the walls, Gissa hears a familiar bellow. First, she sees antlers, then claws, then tentacles. The beast that rose was titanic in size, double that of the lobster monster she had summoned. It was indeed impressive, Gissa sadly had to admit, as it drew the attention of all the Phyrexians who were currently battling with her ghouls. Even Phyrexia knew that this thing could end the battle if not dealt with. Gissa wouldn't let anything reverse this tide, sending what bodies remained from the muck, as few as there were, to attack the rear of the Phyrexians. The amalgamation crushed through the Phyrexians as if they were never there, its massive hooves clobbered, its antlers gored, its pincers pinched, and its tentacles slapped. It was a beautiful whirlwind of death. It was as decisive as Giralf intended it to be. As the Phyrexians were slaughtered, their numbers slowing and then stopping, then eventually retreating from the battle. The night was won. It was Gissa who suggested the bonfire. The city's survivors, along with their undead comrades, gathered the Phyrexian corpses and set them alight. Useless chunks of metal. Neither Gissa or Giralf could will these twisted forms back, so they held no necromantic value. Giralf walked over to his sister to declare his victory. Gissa rebuffed, saying he only crafted that beast using her toy, a toy that fell apart at the seams as soon as the battle ended. They agreed to a draw, their squabbling lasting throughout the night. They would continue to guard Innistrad from Phyrexia from here on out. There were reports that this war was far from over. But here on Innistrad, there were some things Phyrexia couldn't change, such as the relationship between these two siblings. And there you guys go, our latest chapter of March of the Machine story. This was our first glimpse into the Phyrexian attack on Innistrad, a plane that everyone was super interested in visiting because, well, let's not beat around the bush. Emrakul. Everyone everywhere wants to know if the Phyrexians can complete an Eldrazi like Emrakul. She's still trapped within the plane's moon, Tamiyo knew about it and probably shared that info with Elesh Norn, and they could obviously get there with the invasion tree. Or would there be a fight between Emrakul and the Phyrexians? Who would win out? Well, none of those questions get answered here. Rather, we stay more terrestrial, with characters much more Innistradian. While we wait on the moon mommy thing to resolve, we know Soren is aware of the invasion and has been briefed by the other planeswalkers, spreading the word to his inhabitants and preparing a defense. We will see more from him, I'm sure. The bodies of Phyrexians cannot be controlled, at least for very long, from normal necromancy, which is some very nice added information. However, this information is in dispute because in the Dominaria United storyline, there was an article about Liliana Vess, who met with some Phyrexians at her home of Vess Manor. She was able to defeat them and even command the corpses of the fallen Phyrexians there. Now, if I remember correctly, she did so under a lot of stress and it was very, very difficult. So maybe it's not a question of it not being possible, but maybe just skill level, and Liliana Vess is probably the most skillful necromancer in the multiverse. Sorry to admit, Gissa. And we see as everyone's favorite siblings live through this trial, and create probably the most disgusting thing in Innistrad's history. I really hope this thing gets a card. I can see its typing now. Zombie, Giant, Beast, Kraken, Crab. Oh, the absolute glory! Finally a worthy crab legendary for my Crab Ragoon commander deck. Anyway guys, that's going to do it for today's video. Remember, if you enjoyed it, consider showing your support by leaving a like, becoming a subscriber or a member of the channel, leaving a super thanks, and of course sharing it with your friends. It all goes a long way in helping the community grow. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, see ya!